Hey guys, tonight we're going to slow things down and sit with a story that matters. Danielle Rhodes doesn't arrive in a town car. There's no assistant following her, no camera crew, no designer badge swinging from a lanyard. Just her. White sneakers, jeans, a soft gray cardigan, and quiet composure. She's 46, a black woman, a self-made founder who built Rhodes Trust Bank from nothing but grit in a dream. Today, she walks into the very branch that once felt like home. The same one where she'd smiled through the ribbon cutting years ago, where she'd shaken hands with local business owners and promised this place would stand for fairness for everyone. But this visit isn't about meetings or media. It's a simple personal errand. A withdrawal, $5,000. Something routine, something small, at least it should have been. Before we begin, please like the video and subscribe, but only if stories like this truly move you. Comment your city and the time you're watching. Now close your eyes or don't, it's your choice. Either way, you're about to witness something real. The lobby still smells like pine-scented cleaner and faint espresso. End-of-day light spills in through the glass facade, casting a warm sheen on the marble floor. The staff are winding down half-packed files, the hum of printers, the soft murmur of background music. A tired-looking security guard stands near the entrance with his arms folded, watching the clock more than the customers. Danielle steps through the glass doors, her sneakers barely making a sound. A couple of older patrons on the bench glance up. One squints as if trying to place her, but recognition doesn't come. Not in that outfit, not without the press releases or the tailored suits. She walks with steady grace to the main counter. There's a young teller with pale pink lipstick in a tightly pinned bun, Alyssa Green sitting behind the glass, eyes fixed on a spreadsheet. Danielle offers a gentle smile, her tone as polite as it's always been. "Hi there, I'd like to make a withdrawal." Alyssa doesn't look up. "Fill this out," she says flatly, sliding a form across the counter like she's tossing a napkin. Her voice is practiced indifference. No greeting, no name. Just the hollow script of someone who's stopped seeing the people in front of her. Danielle accepts the paper without flinching. She doesn't correct her. Doesn't say, "I built this place. I signed the lease on this building." Instead, she pulls a pen from her pocket, writes slowly and clearly her full name, account number, the withdrawal amount. $5,000. Not excessive, not suspicious, certainly not for someone of her standing. She hands it back with her ID still calm, still gracious. That's when the atmosphere shifts. Alyssa blinks at the ID for a beat too long. Her brows pull in, and her eyes flick from the card to Danielle's sweater, to her sneakers, back to the card. She tilts her head slightly like something doesn't add up. No words, just judgment pooling behind her blank expression. Then, still saying nothing, she rises from her chair and walks briskly through the frosted glass door toward the manager's office, form and ID in hand. Danielle doesn't move. She knows this protocol, or at least what protocol should look like. But this isn't that. There's a strange tension bleeding into the air. The kind that builds not from process but from prejudice. From someone deciding silently, this doesn't look right. This person doesn't belong. A minute passes. Then two. The same older couple on the bench look over, again uneasy. A middle-aged man at the kiosk starts to shift his weight, sensing something beneath the surface. Danielle rests her hand on the counter and breathes slowly. She's been in rooms filled with billion-dollar contracts and government compliance audits. She's stood her ground in boardrooms with people twice her age. But somehow this moment, this silent questioning of her identity in the building she brought to life, cuts deeper. And still she waits. She remembers the launch party, the cake with the Rhodes logo, the framed photos of her parents on the table beside the plaque, the promise she made to herself. No one who walks in here should ever feel small. But not everything stays buried forever. The frosted door opens again. Out steps a man in his late 40s, clean-cut, deep blue tie, knotted tight eyes, already assessing. Thomas Myers, the branch manager. Hired 3 years ago. High marks in operational compliance, low marks in empathy. His face is composed, but his body language is stiff-guarded. He walks up to the counter and offers a dry smile. "Miss Rhodes," he asks, like he's unsure. Like he hasn't read the hundreds of internal memos with her name at the bottom. Danielle nods once. "That's correct." He glances at the form, flips the ID back and forth in his fingers. "You're requesting a withdrawal of $5,000, yes, from my personal account. He says nothing for a moment, just stares. Then, and what's your current occupation, Miss Rhodes? The question isn't illegal, but it isn't necessary. Danielle answers softly. I run a financial firm. Thomas doesn't blink. Which one? Danielle's voice doesn't change. Rhodes Trust, the same one this branch belongs to. Thomas's mouth opens, then closes. He looks at her again more slowly this time, and yet somehow even less convinced. And this is a personal withdrawal. It is. He nods slightly but doesn't move. Instead, he asks another question. When was your last deposit into this account? Danielle exhales, not audibly, just enough to steady herself. Her hands remain still. I don't remember the exact date, but the funds are there. You're welcome to check. Thomas glances toward the teller area, then back at her. He isn't moving to verify anything. He's still assessing, still searching for a reason to doubt. And somewhere behind the glass, a subtle alarm clicks beneath his desk. Danielle sees the movement. It's slight, but she knows the signs. She's been in enough boardroom security briefings to recognize the telltale signs of a silent escalation. A call for backup. A quiet warning that says, we might have a problem here. Except she is the founder. And the problem isn't who she is, it's who they assume she isn't. The soft chime of the entrance bell is quickly drowned by the weight of silence spreading through the lobby. A uniformed security guard enters, tall and broad-shouldered, his boots making dull thuds across the polished floor. He doesn't speak, just takes his place behind Danielle, hands clasped, posture stiff. He hasn't been briefed, at least not fully, but he's here now like a wall erected between her and the place she once called her own. Danielle doesn't turn around. She doesn't flinch or shift. Her fingers remain lightly resting on the marble counter, her gaze steady on Thomas Myers, who now seems smaller, despite his position behind the desk. The presence of security, though unspoken, speaks volumes. It doesn't declare danger, it declares discomfort. Discomfort with her skin, her clothes, her quiet self-assurance. With the image she disrupts just by existing as herself in this space. Thomas clears his throat. We've just had some issues with fraud recently. It's standard now to verify details, especially for high-value withdrawals. Danielle's eyes narrow only slightly. Her voice remains composed. 5,000 isn't high value, not for this institution, and certainly not for the account holder in question. Thomas opens his mouth again, but whatever defense he had prepared dies on his tongue. His gaze flicks toward the security guard for validation, but the guard stays silent. This isn't his fight. It never was. Danielle stands between them, a still point in the growing storm. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't plead. She doesn't demand recognition, but her presence commands it anyway. Alyssa has returned now, hovering behind her manager. Her posture is rigid, but her eyes dart uneasy. She's beginning to realize that whatever she thought she was protecting has now cracked under its own weight. Still, she doesn't speak. Neither does Thomas. Instead, he reaches for another form, an internal one this time, and says, we'll need a few more pieces of information before this can be approved. Danielle doesn't move to take the paper. You already have what you need, she replies calmly. My identification, my account number, my name. Thomas hesitates. There are procedures, Danielle cuts in gently, her voice still even but undeniable. Then follow them, without adding steps that don't exist. Thomas looks down the edges of the form, crinkling under his fingers. Around them, the bank has gone still. The woman on the bench now watches without shame. A man near the deposit kiosk leans forward slightly, phone held low but ready. The energy has shifted. The once private moment of dismissal has become public theater, and everyone's eyes are on the people who hold power and how they choose to wield it. Danielle can feel the weight of every past moment when she let something slide. Every meeting where she swallowed discomfort, every sidelong comment ignored for the sake of diplomacy. But today is different. Because this space was built with her name, her integrity, and now it threatens to erase her for daring to show up as anything other than their idea of important. Miss Rhodes, Thomas starts again, his voice softer now. Let's not escalate. She raises a hand. Not high, just enough. Thomas, I built this branch. I reviewed every blueprint, approved your hiring file, and stood on this very floor when we welcomed our first customer. What's escalated here isn't coming from me. It's coming from fear, from assumption, and from the silent permission you gave to treat me like a stranger in the house I created. The words don't come with fire. They don't need to. The truth is louder than anger. Thomas stiffens, visibly swallowing. Behind him, Alyssa looks away, her cheeks flushed. The guard, sensing the energy, steps back, slightly unsure now of his role in this unfolding moment. But Danielle doesn't stop. Her voice lowers almost like a whisper meant to echo. You didn't see a founder. You saw a woman out of place. You saw sneakers and a cardigan and skin that didn't match the power in your mind. And you decided without speaking it that I needed to prove myself. Thomas exhales, but it doesn't bring relief. The room is thick with something heavier than discomfort. It's the realization of failure and the knowledge that silence won't save anyone now. Danielle doesn't break eye contact. But not everything stays buried forever. Sometimes it rises, quietly, unshakably, and it demands to be seen. Another beat passes. She steps back, not retreating, but repositioning. From the pocket of her cardigan, she pulls out her phone. With a deliberate hand, she presses record. The camera lens captures Thomas's pale face, the security guard's uncertain stance, Alyssa's hunched shoulders. Then she turns it toward herself. My name is Danielle Rhodes. I am the founder and CEO of Rhodes Trust Bank. Today I came to make a simple withdrawal from my personal account. And instead of being treated like a customer or even a human being, I was interrogated, doubted, and surrounded by security. Not because of my behavior, not because of protocol, but because of who I am and how I look. Gasps ripple in soft waves through the lobby. Phones lift, heads turn. Some nod quietly. Others remain frozen, unsure. But the silence has cracked. Thomas tries to speak. Miss Rhodes. She turns the phone back to him. Say it on camera. Explain why you asked for multiple levels of verification that are not required. Why security was called before any system check was even made. Why the account holder's appearance mattered more than her name. He says nothing. She lowers the phone. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives in a single sentence spoken clearly in the center of the room. And sometimes that sentence is, I am the one you thought didn't belong. Danielle doesn't move after speaking. Her phone remains in her hand, the screen still lit, camera steady. The lobby, once filled with soft sounds and fluorescent hum, now holds only silence. But it is not empty, it is charged. The kind of silence that wraps around every wall, every person, every breath. The kind that forces people to feel. Thomas Myers stands there, his hands limp at his sides, as though someone unplugged the current that once powered his authority. He stares not at Danielle, not at the camera, but at the marble counter between them, suddenly very aware of the reflection staring back at him. His mouth opens slightly, but no words arrive. The polished image of control he projected has crumbled into something he can't smooth over with corporate tone. Behind him, Alyssa's composure is also unraveling. Her hands fidget beneath the counter, thumb digging into the edges of a drawer as if it might help her disappear into it. She doesn't speak. She doesn't apologize. Her lips part, then press together again. A shadow of regret flashes in her eyes, but it's tangled in fear, not courage. Danielle knows. She's seen that look before. She sets the phone on the counter, gently still recording. Her eyes never leave Thomas. You wanted to follow procedure. Here's one. Transparency. A beat, then another, and then the voice of a customer, an elderly woman with a lavender scarf tied around her shoulders, soft but firm from the waiting area. I recognize her, she says. She was at the opening. I remember the speech she gave. Murmurs swell, quiet affirmations. A man in a business blazer nods, holding up his phone. Another woman taps her screen, whispering to her partner. This isn't hearsay. This is recognition, years late, but right on time. Danielle doesn't smile. Not yet, because the security guard hasn't moved either. He stands stiffly behind her, the tension in his stance betraying his uncertainty. When he arrived, he assumed the problem wore soft shoes and a gentle voice. Now he doesn't know where to look. Danielle finally turns, meeting his gaze with the same calm steadiness she's shown from the moment she walked through the doors. You were summoned here because I asked to withdraw my own money, she says softly. Is that what a threat looks like? He opens his mouth, his voice cracks slightly. Ma'am, I was just following orders. They told me to respond. And now that you're here, she asks, what do you see? The man's throat bobs. He doesn't answer. Danielle turns back to Thomas. This isn't just about me. It never was. It's about what happens when assumptions go unchecked, when a woman walks into her own legacy and is still asked to prove she belongs. The teller next to Alyssa glances over her fingers, frozen mid-keystroke. Even the hum of the office printer stops a coincidence that feels poetic. Thomas finally raises his eyes to meet Danielle's, but the firmness in her stare doesn't waver. She's not yelling, she's not accusing, she is simply being, and that somehow is harder to confront. He clears his throat, voice paper thin. "Miss Rhodes, I apologize if—" "No," she interrupts gently. "Not if." She lifts the phone and turns the camera to herself once again. "I've spent over a decade building a company that was supposed to be different, where respect wasn't conditional, where customers weren't treated with suspicion because they didn't look the part. But today in this branch, that vision was broken. I was broken until I remembered who I am. More customers are recording now. No one is pretending not to watch. Even employees from the back office are peeking out, faces tense." Danielle continues, her voice unwavering. "This wasn't just a mistake. It was a symptom of how deep bias still runs. And I won't be silent about it." Thomas tries again, desperation tinting his voice. "I didn't know. You weren't expected." Danielle lifts an eyebrow. "Expected, is that what decides how someone is treated?" His shoulders sink, the words unraveling him faster than any policy review ever could. He looks down again and unable to answer. "And what if I had been just another customer?" she asked, turning to the crowd. "Would this treatment have been okay then?" No one speaks, because everyone knows the answer. Danielle picks up her form, the one Alyssa slid across the counter, like it didn't matter. She holds it in the air just slightly, then places it flat in front of Thomas. "I came here today to withdraw $5,000, she says quietly. "But what I ended up withdrawing was the mask some of you wear." Her words hang heavy in the space between them. Then, almost like an exhale from the building itself, the atmosphere begins to shift. Not in volume, not in sound, but in energy. The crowd understands what they've just witnessed. It's no longer just about whether Danielle gets her money. That moment passed long ago. Now it's about whether this institution, the one she birthed, will remember its mother's voice. She doesn't demand action. She doesn't need to. The truth has already been spoken. And truth once seen cannot be unseen. But not everything stays buried forever, especially not dignity. Danielle doesn't leave the counter, not yet. The paper remains between her and Thomas Myers, no longer a transaction form, but a silent ledger of judgment of what was withheld and what was revealed. Behind her, the second security guard arrives. Broader, younger, his movements sharp and purposeful. He pauses at the edge of the tension in the room radio, at his side, scanning the space like someone walking into a situation that doesn't match the description he was given. His eyes settle first on the manager, then on Danielle, then on the lit phone in her hand. Thomas flinches slightly. He hasn't spoken in over a minute, but his posture tells the whole story. The man who once stood behind rules and procedure now stands behind nothing. Danielle turns toward the new arrival. "Good afternoon," she says, calm as glass. "Would you like to be on camera too, or have you come here to witness something worth learning from?" He doesn't answer. He simply nods, uncertain, and steps back because even he knows that something irreversible is happening in this room. Danielle breathes in once steady, then she lifts the phone one last time and speaks into it with crystal precision. "I want every person watching this here or online to understand something. You can build something with your whole heart, put your name on the doors, carve your values into the walls. But that doesn't stop people from forgetting who you are the moment you don't fit their mold. It doesn't stop them from treating your existence as an inconvenience. The customers in the lobby don't move. Some hold their breath. Others hold back tears." Danielle turns the camera toward Thomas again. "This is the manager who called security on me. Not because I broke policy, but because I broke his expectation of what power should look like. My name is Danielle Rhodes. I founded this institution. And today, in the very space I created, I was treated as a stranger." The guard near the door exhales. He looks down at his shoes. The one behind her shifts uncomfortably, suddenly aware that his presence was never needed, only used. Danielle places the phone on the counter with finality and leans in just slightly. Not threatening, not towering, but certain. "You made me a threat," she says to Thomas, her voice low because I refuse to apologize for being exactly who I am. Thomas swallows hard. Miss Rhodes, I was only trying to what she says, not with rage, but with weariness. Protect the bank from its own founder. His shoulders slump. Alyssa's face is pale. Her hands shake slightly as she grips the counter edge. Still, she doesn't speak. Still, she can't meet Danielle's gaze. Danielle finally straightens and turns to face the crowd. Her voice softens, not out of weakness, but compassion. I don't want applause. I don't need sympathy. But if you've ever walked into a room and felt your worth shrink in someone else's eyes, I want you to remember this moment. Because you don't have to prove anything to people who refuse to see you. You don't have to shrink to make others feel safe. A beat. Then a voice breaks through. A man in his 60s, well-dressed, speaking from the back row of chairs. Miss Rhodes, I moved my accounts here because of you. Because I believed in what you stood for. And I still do. More nods. More quiet affirmations. A few people start clapping, not loud, but steady. Real. Danielle doesn't smile. Not yet. She's not here for approval, but she does nod gratefully firmly. She turns back to Thomas, who looks as though the floor beneath him might give way. His voice is a whisper. What happens now, Danielle's reply, is like steel cloaked in silk. What happens now, she says, is accountability. She lifts her phone again and stops the recording. Then she slides the form aside and places her ID card gently next to it. The same card he once held like evidence against her is now her quiet declaration of truth. To the staff behind the counter, she says, without looking back, and to every person here who stood in silence, remember this moment. Because the next time someone walks in who doesn't fit your picture of wealth or power or prestige, you won't get to say you didn't know better. The silence that follows is not tense. It is cleansing. Then at last she speaks to Thomas directly. I expect your resignation by tomorrow morning. Not because I want revenge, but because leadership isn't a title. It's a responsibility. And you've forgotten that. His face crumples, not in outrage, but in acceptance. There's nothing left to defend. Danielle nods to the guards. You're dismissed. And they leave quiet, chastened. She gathers her ID, tucks it back into her cardigan, and turns toward the exit. The lobby doesn't erupt. It doesn't cheer. It just stands in quiet reverence for the woman who refused to bow. But not everything stays buried forever. Some things rise in full light, in full view, and demand the world look back. Danielle walks toward the exit, not as a woman who's won an argument, but as one who's reclaimed her ground. Each step echoes through the lobby, not loud in sound, but undeniable in presence. Customers move aside with reverence, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Some with bowed heads, some with eyes that follow her like a truth they can no longer ignore. She pauses just before reaching the door. Turning slowly, she addresses the room one final time, not to scold, not to boast, but to remind. I never wanted to be treated differently, she says. I just wanted to be treated fairly. That's what Rhodes Trust was built for. To see people, to serve them with dignity. And if we can't do that when the founder walks in, then who are we doing it for? Her voice carries without needing volume. The bank feels like a cathedral, now silent, heavy with meaning. Alyssa, who has remained frozen behind the counter, finally breaks. Her voice trembles, nearly inaudible. I'm sorry, Miss Rhodes. Danielle's eyes meet hers. For the first time since this all began, the sharp edges in her gaze soften. I accept your apology, she says gently. But change comes not in words, Alyssa, in what you choose to do next. Then she opens the glass doors and steps out into the fading light of early evening. The sun, now low in the sky, casts a soft amber glow across the sidewalk. Her steps are slow, composed. There's no rush now, no more proving. The weight she carried when she entered that subtle ache of being unseen is gone. Inside, the ripple effect begins. Phones buzz across the region as the video begins to circulate. Staff at other branches text one another. Did you see this? Is it real? Corporate leadership watches in stunned silence. Within hours, an emergency meeting is called. By morning, it's clear this isn't just an internal incident. It's a public reckoning. Thomas Myers submits his resignation before sunrise. The official statement from headquarters is swift and unequivocal. We stand with our founder. Respect is not optional. It is foundational. A formal anti-bias initiative rolls out within 72 hours, along with new employee training that bears Danielle's name at the top of every page. At the central branch, a new poster is mounted above the teller line. It shows Danielle not in a suit or at a podium, but in her white sneakers and gray cardigan, standing calmly at the counter with her ID card in hand. The caption reads, "Power doesn't always wear a suit. Dignity doesn't ask permission." Alyssa attends every training session. She speaks up often, not with defensiveness, but with humility. She tells new hires what she learned that day, about assumption, about silence, about the difference between compliance and compassion. And as for Danielle, she returns to her work, not with bitterness, but with resolve. She tours branches across the country, meeting with employees face to face. She doesn't mention the incident unless someone brings it up. When they do, she listens. She nods. Then she asks them what they want to build, because she's never been interested in punishment, only in change. And change, as she knows now, doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it walks in quietly, wearing sneakers. So let this be remembered. Justice isn't loud. Redemption isn't grand. Sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one that never needed to shout. Sometimes the most powerful person in the building is the one they didn't recognize until it was too late. So now the story settles. The fire has passed. What remains are the embers, the ones that stay lit in quiet minds long after the crowd is gone. Danielle didn't set out to expose anyone. She wasn't seeking revenge or spectacle. All she wanted was to be treated with the same respect she spent her life giving others. That's all most people want. What made this moment powerful wasn't her title or the camera or even the policy changes that followed. It was the simple fact that she refused to let someone else redefine her worth. She stood firm, not with fury, but with focus. Not with rage, but with grace. So if you've ever been looked over, spoken down to, or quietly dismissed, hold this story close. Let it remind you that dignity is not earned by appearances. It is lived in posture, presence, in purpose. And when it's tested, as it so often is, the quietest strength will speak the loudest truth. Because no matter what the world tries to take from you, your peace, your voice, your place, you get to decide who you are. And you don't need anyone's permission to take up space.